Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And today, we're talking about defining your freedom point.
How much would it really cost on a monthly basis to live the life that I want? The freedom point is that point at which you no longer have to work, but if you choose to work, it's your choice to do that.
Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks. We're so glad you're here. I have Joe with me here today, and we are going to talk about one of our favorite topics, and that is the freedom point. This is what we work toward on behalf of all of our members, and it is that point at which you can work because you want to, not because you have to, or you can stop altogether because what you have worked so hard to build now sustains the life that you want to live. But as we take our members through their freedom roadmap and try to define this or have them try to define it, many of them get stuck and they think, I don't know what that number is. I don't know when enough will be enough. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you, Joe, about how do people define what their freedom point is?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think most people get stuck because they really haven't processed the thought before. And maybe it's just the clients that we work with are very driven human beings. They're very successful. They tend to make a lot of money. And so it's just more of that. Just keep doing that until you hit that point of burnout. And now it's like, okay, I got to do something different. And not that it's too late at that point. It's just a different kind of conversation. So I think for anyone who's listening, I think one really good exercise is ask your really affluent friends, how much do you think is needed to live the best life ever? Open-ended, just kind of ask them what that is. I've done this a lot, and I'll kind of give you the cheat code, or I think the cheat code is, and this is minus any debt, like for, house paid off, cars paid off, like, so no external payments. But the most common number that I came back with averaged $30,000 a month. So $30,000 of spendable money per month. Now, that doesn't mean you can go on vacation and buy the home that you're vacationing in every time you do it. But just think through the process. If I had 30 grand in cash every month, and don't worry about, like, I know one of the things that people get confused or wrapped around the axle with is like, well, is that in, like, what about then and adjusted for inflation, all that? Don't think about that. Just think about in today's dollars, what does it mean to live that life? Now, for some of the people listening, they're like, that's half of what we're spending right now. Cool. Adjust your number to whatever it needs to be, but process the thought. How much would it really cost on a monthly basis to live the life that I want? And if you throw like mortgage and all that kind of stuff into there, you might have to be additive with that if your house isn't paid off or you don't have that money squirreled away to pay cash for a house. But that's the most common number that I've come up with the people that I've asked this is $30,000 a month, which for a lot of people, I think that's a lot lower than the number they would have expected it to be. Literally to do whatever my question that I usually ask is, how much do you think it costs to do basically whatever you want, whenever, without limitation? So,
because I feel like a lot of the people I talk to would be like, there's no way I could spend $30,000 in a month when I don't have hardly any expenses. And so I think this goes deeper to getting clarity on the life you want to live.
Yes.
I talk to people who they live on $5,000 a month now or $10,000 a month. And they're like, we're really happy. We don't need a lot. But then there's others who spend literally $100,000 a month. So it is a big scale. But I think when we're going through this and we ask people to give me a number that freedom point is, like your total net worth. Some people say, I would say a common one is $5 million. $5 million, and then that gives me enough to live. Some people say 2 million. Some people are like, oh, 10 million, but I don't think that's enough. So,
right.
I think.
Yeah. So how do you come up with that number? So that's kind of a number you can back into from a financial planning perspective. And that is where, like, for example, our financial planning team, their job is to not only incorporate like just cost of living, but also the goals that are on their freedom roadmap. So it really goes back to what you're saying, Erin. the first step for people is to identify, like, what are your goals? What is it that you want to accomplish? We've got a lot of doctors who want to buy airplanes, for example, or they want to buy their dream home or their mountain home or whatever it might be. Those things require money. And it's like, you need to be in a liquid position at that moment when that's going to happen to be able to make that happen. So we want to be efficient with our assets, and that's where the asset and tax team, side of thing comes into play. We're talking, so that's all the technical aspects. We're talking more like the emotional high level element, like a really simple mathematical way to do this and to be very conservative. Just multiply what you want annually by 23. So that's going to be less than a 5% annual return on, on your investment. So let's because I'm not good enough with math, I'll pull out my calculator. So I'm just going to use the number. Let's say it's 30,000 a month. Again, this is like, do whatever you want, whenever you want, take whatever vacations, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So that's 360,000 per year that you need, right? So if you multiply that by 23, that's 8.28 million. And if you, in theory, had we'll call it 8.3 million sitting in investment accounts at 5%, is going to yield 414,000 per year. So again, calculating all the, just everything that you need to do, that's going to be roughly accurate math. So I think for most people, when you look at and depending on where you're at now, like where you're starting right now, maybe that feels like a daunting number. Like, how am I going to get 8 million, in cash, or in investments just sitting there? That's aside from the fact. Just know what reality is. So if your number is much lower, let's say it's 10,000, so you want 120,000 per year, right, to live life. That's your freedom point times 23. That's 2.76 million. So really, really simple numbers.
Yeah. And that's just living off of the dividends, though. Like, that's not drawing down.
Correct. Yeah. So that you wouldn't touch the principal with that. So that would yield enough money every year to live the life that you want. You can get into some of the nuance, and there's a lot of different philosophies when it comes to financial planning and inheritance or legacy or things like that. Like, I've got one of my friends, very successful financial advisor, and he's like, I believe you should die with zero. Like, your last check should bounce.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Other people are like, no, I want to leave money. Warren Buffett and his, I can't remember his wife's name. They wrote a letter a couple of years ago that I thought was really, really good. And in it, he talked about, I want to leave enough money to where my kids can do anything that they want, but not so much that they don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that's a good way to look at it. And I've worked with a lot of families of like ultra high net worth, like hundreds of millions of dollars. And how that money gets disseminated in legacy is really, really impactful to the kids. And I'd also say, actually, I'd ask you, Erin, like, most of the doctors that I've interfaced with in the Terra Firma community are really self-made. Like, they didn't necessarily come from money. It's like they worked really, really hard. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And that comes out when we go through your values staircase and what does success mean to you. And for so many, it's, of course, having freedom and being able to live the life I want to live. But then it goes into, I want to give my kids a better life than what I had.
Right. Which is really, really common in our community. And I think this is applicable if you're listening to this and you either, come from a lot of wealth, maybe there were some tools and things that you were given that gave you an advantage in life. Or maybe you're also self-made and it's like, look, this kind of by the strength of my body and the brawn of my back, I got to where I am. And oftentimes we want to give that advantage to our kids. But if you really go back and think about your life and who you are today, so much of it is because of the difficult things that you went through. And so I don't necessarily ascribe to the, hey, just build this massive fortune and hand it down to your kids. If you do that, you've got to do it really intentionally. Otherwise, you will actually I believe you'll be harming them.
And that comes up a lot too, as this struggle that our members have where they're making more money than they even could have imagined and living this beautiful life. But now they're raising kids and they're like, how do I give them enough, but still not so much that they don't understand the value of money or hard work. And they don't really, it's this tension of like
Totally.
giving them a really nice life, but also not disincentivizing them from pulling yourself up by the bootstraps and becoming successful. So
well, and contextually understanding, like we live in an area where there's like one family had 2 Bugattis, like not one Bugatti, but 2 Bugattis in addition to their planes and all that kind of stuff. So our kids are going to school with these kids and they're watching. Like I remember when they were in high school and one of the kids was, so the older brother got a brand new Porsche 911 Turbo when he turned 16.
Oh my gosh.
Hello. Right. And then the daughter who came a couple years later was just appalled that she could only drive their Range Rover. Right. I was just like, okay. So it was interesting to have conversations with our kids to help them understand, like, this isn't real life. Like this is a very, very different, don't be comparatively, bringing our life and their life up as like, that's what's normal.
Yeah.
I say all of this to say, you've got to define it for you. And this is a very individual kind of thing. And, I believe that faith has a lot to play into this as well. So it's like seeking guidance, from God and from others. It's like, hey, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I take what I've been given and steward it well, including the kids that we have, if we have kids. And so I think setting them up for success is really helpful. All of this kind of winds back to that point of, do you plan to exit your life with $0, or are you going to be passing something on? So that has impact in that drawdown against that principle that you might have. Mm-hmm. And then if you are going to draw down to 0 by the end of your life, when's the end of your life? You don't know when that's going to be. And so there's some nuance that, like, us as financial planners, that we will utilize to make our best guess estimates for these things. So without getting into all that nuance, because that's what causes confusion, just really simplify this. What do you need to live your life monthly? Multiply that by 12 so you know your annual, and multiply that by 23 if you want to be super conservative. Or you can kind of use that calculation and back into the math if you want to. I believe that's most conservative. Never touch the principal. And at the end of your life, if you want to leave a portion of that to your kids, or all of it to your kids, or you want to give that to charity, or whatever it might be, just be intentional and think about it now. And I think the other thing is, this concept of retirement has been popularized over the last, 40 or 50 years. It's actually not been around for that long. We have just grown up with this concept, so we think it's been here forever, right? It's a newer concept in humanity. And I don't think it's necessarily a great thing. No. I think where a lot of our doctors feel the pressure, and where they really feel this mounting in their life, is the need to work. So you said it really well. The freedom point is that point at which you no longer have to work. But if you choose to work, it's your choice to do that. And that's kind of a special moment when that happens. So that is our goal for our doctors, is, reduce their tax liability so they can take that extra money and invest into their assets. So their assets are outpacing their ability to generate income. Awesome. Now you're working and have that income, and you have assets producing.
Yeah. And that is the next question we ask with the freedom point. It's like, okay, how much will it take? And then by when? Like, what age? And that's another thing people struggle with, because people, of course, fall across the spectrum. Some they can't wait to, scale back or stop. But more of our members, they just love what they do. And they don't really see themselves retiring. They see, okay, scaling back. It's really nice that a lot of them will have the flexibility to do that. But it becomes this, I want to work forever. But then it goes back to having the clarity on, when you do scale back, what do you want that life to look like? So I just find there's struggle in that question too. And everything we talk about goes back to actually slowing down to ask yourself, what do I want? And then aiming for that. So I don't know. What's your freedom point, Joe?
I'm trusting all of my friends and what they've said, and that I've found. I think that 30,000 a month, I believe that 8 million to 10 million kind of range is a good goal of just investable assets that are sitting there. For those of us who are business owners, it does look very different. So I do want to bring this up, because we have a lot of people listening who are practice owners. And there is a risk because a lot of our net worth is wrapped up in our business. And that's not, that's not like it's generating returns in a different way. And it's not like you can just count on that forever. One of my friends built and sold a company. He sold it when he was 50, which was, was pretty young for him. And he still had a lot of entrepreneurial juice left. But he sold it, and it was right before 2008. So I think he sold in 05 or something like that. And within 5 years of selling, that whole industry collapsed. So what he built is, literally this thing that yielded all of what he has had for the last, since 2005, an amazing life, doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants. That would have been gone overnight if he had stayed in that business. And so for practice owners, life is a little bit different. And there is a risk that when you hit your freedom point, every day that you stay in that business after that, there is this risk that it could all evaporate. And it has before for other people. It will in the future. Now, whether it will for you or not. So there's a little bit of positioning that's a little bit different. And that's kind of the contention that I feel is like, I want to do what I do forever. Like, I love what I get to do. But it is wrapped up in this business, and the business yields a phenomenal life for us. So, you know what I'm saying? Like there's this tension as business owners versus like really high income earning doctors, which is most of what we work with. So for me, 30 grand a month, I've kind of done the calculations, and I feel like that's appropriate for what we want to do, both from and maybe we can talk about this another time, but there's also a philanthropic side of what I have. And so my tie to that 30 grand is not necessarily so I can just spin off and, go buy a Ferrari and do it. That's not what it's all about.
Yeah. So I would love to talk about that on another episode. I would say, or I want to ask, what would you tell the person? 'Cause this is quite a few of my members where, again, they're making more than they ever thought. They've built more than they could ever think. We look at their asset map and we see their net worth and all these different accounts that are just growing and growing. And yet when we ask them, what are your goals? They're like, I've achieved everything and more that I thought I would. And when you try to get them, we talked about this with Todd Dathy, like, what do you want beyond that? And they don't know. Like, so what are some good questions to ask? Like, if you've gotten to that point, and I think these people really don't know when is enough. If they had $30 million there, they'd be like, I don't know. They still feel this like lack of scarcity or fear. Also to like, well, I don't know what else I would do. So what advice would you give to people like that?
You better get clarity. I really think, ancient wisdom says without a vision, people perish. And I think that was true a few thousand years ago. And I think that's really true today. And I think humans are weird because we need purpose. Like there's something around purpose that really drives humans. And without devolving too much, like there's a lot of studies that they've done on retirement in particular. And retirement, like the volume of people who die within a very short period of time of retiring is like shocking. And I always feel like it's so tragic. I'm like, really? Like you worked your whole life to hit this moment and then 2 weeks later you have a heart attack and die. So I think there's something to be said for purpose. So you might be one of those doctors where you're like, hey, I've achieved everything that I ever thought was even possible and more times 2, right? Whatever it might be, like you're there. Awesome. That's where you're at right now. So what therefore is your vision next? Because without that vision, you will spin up all kinds of headache and heartache. Like we create chaos so that we have the purpose of solving that chaos. Does that make sense? Like how many people do we know where they hit these like pinnacles of success and then their life just unravels? And it's like, because they had no purpose. I believe what's going on is, cool, I'm going to create chaos so I have purpose to solve that chaos or live in it or whatever it might be. So I really think that it's imperative. Like, obviously, if you're a doctor listening to this and you have a coach at Terra Firma, get that clarity, or your coach has probably already helped create that clarity with you. But if you're not, with terra firma, you need to just create a vision that is compelling. By the way, it doesn't have to be by yourself. If you're married or if you have kids, like create a family vision. Cool. I've accomplished what I thought I could individually, but what can we accomplish as a family? Right? What does this turn into? So again, I'm just a big believer in creating visions that you're then chasing down.
Me too. I love it. Thanks, Joe. Well, Doc, we hope this was helpful. Bottom line is ask yourself, what does my ideal day, my ideal week, my ideal year look like? And then what is it going to cost to achieve that? And then that's enough. And then go cast a bigger vision for your future. And if you need help with any of this, the practical side of it or the emotional goal setting part of it, we can help. So check us out. We'll leave some links below. And we're so glad you joined us. Thank you. Until next time, go be a wealth maverick.